So last week, our 6-year-old daughter looks up at us with her sweet, beautiful face and says, "Would you rather have a hole in your head where everyone can see all of your thoughts, or would you rather be dead?"
That's the question.
And then she said, "I'd rather be dead."
The apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
It doesn't matter how cute she is. She's still got my DNA. Poor thing. I'm going to get her started on this Holocaust books ASAP.
Welcome to the Mockingcast, the podcast of Mockingbird Ministries. I'm David Zoll, your host, and in just a few moments, I'll be joined by my co-hosts, Sarah Condon and RJ Heyman. We come to you every week to explore a few of the places where we currently see grace, and its absence, playing out in unexpected and compelling ways. Glad to have you with us.
Praise the Lord. Praise the Lord. God.
Well, on that note, what else is on your mind, guys? How's it going? What's the last couple weeks been like?
You know, we've survived a few hurricanes. It's crazy. As we're speaking, we just Beta has just like caused some flooding, but not anything too disastrous. But
The fact it's called beta is just absurd.
I know.
Yeah, it's like a fish.
I mean, it's just hard to focus on anything super negative right now because there's like a lot of it. So I'm just kind of I don't know. Here's my plug. This is my weekly plug every week for anxiety medication. RJ, how are you?
The Mockingcast brought to you by Pfizer.
Wellbutrin. Yeah, exactly.
I'm doing well. It finally is a little bit cooler than it has been. I feel like fall has kind of arrived in South Florida, which means it's like 83 rather than 93.
Right.
So that's what passes for fall here. But I'm doing well. I think as is well documented on this podcast, I don't exercise. But I actually did last week. I went and there's a little park near us where there's this like tennis clinic you can show up for, which is pretty much every day. And so I went and played like tennis last week, Friday and Saturday for the first time in, 5 years or something. I'm still sore. It's 5 days, days later, but I'm hoping to recover in time for to play some more tennis this week. So that was a little sign of life, I feel like. And
I would have loved
kids are
to
in
have
school
to
and
witness that.
I don't know.
I know, me too. I was just thinking that. Like, what did like this like lumbering hasn't exercised in 5 years RJ look like?
Well, I rolled onto the court, and it was really fun. So I'm doing okay.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it.
Dave,
How about you, Dave? How about you, Soapbox? What's up, Soapbox?
Yeah, speaking of exercise, I don't do anything but that these days. I'm just
Chris Pratt. I'm just calling you Chris Pratt. That's what you are.
100%.
just kidding. It's been a pretty good week. I just wrote about something on the website. Actually, I just binged the trilogy of movies that Richard Linklater made over the last 30 years. The Before trilogy: Before Sunrise, Before Sunset, and Before Midnight.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm just sort of floating on air from those. I thought they were fantastic. I'd kind of avoided them because I knew that they were so talky, and even though I like other talky films, these were just I don't know, just affirming about what's important in life, and I don't know. I found it to be therapeutic and uplifting. You guys seen those movies?
Yes.
Yes.
It's been a while, but yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah. Well, the first one takes place in 1994.
Yeah, it does.
Two people getting off a train in Vienna, and I actually spent a year in Vienna as a study abroad, and maybe a few years after that. So it kind of it's all in keeping with my nostalgia trip and my the flesh pots of Egypt that I just preached about. But it brought me up into the future where the most recent one is the guy is 41 years old. So anyway, a little bit of therapy via art, which was a good thing for me. And speaking of therapy through art, Lana Del Rey.
Yeah.
Do you guys know her music? Do you enjoy her stylings?
she's got a good beat. I don't know. The young people like her.
She's kind of controversial. She was hated when
She
she
is.
first came out because she sort of mixed a little bit of hip hop with sort of indie pop and sort of croony stuff. But she's since become, people thought she was just a product, and she is. It is Elizabeth Grant is playing a character named Lana Del Rey, this sort of heroin chic or damsel in distress. The sort of underbelly of Sunshine State.
You sound like Almost Famous right now. You sound like you're very.
He's just like reading reviews from that movie.
Pretty much the inner Rolling Stone critic just coming out.
I knew we
right
shouldn't have talked
now.
about music, but we're not going to talk about her music. I love her music. I think it's
Good.
fantastic. She's a bit of a genius, I think, and she's got a new album coming out called Chemtrails Over the Country Club, which I think is a great title for a record. But she was interviewed in Interview Magazine last week, and this is why we're talking about her, because she had some very interesting things to say about mental health and sort of spiritual crises in the pandemic. This was in early September. She was interviewed actually by her producer, Jack Antonoff, who's just produces just about everyone, Taylor Swift, the whole nine. And this is what she said. I subscribe to the idea that what's going on in the macrocosm, whether it be in the presidency or a virus that keeps us isolated, is a reflection of what's going on in the individual home and inside bedrooms and what people intimately talk about. I think there's been existential panic for a long time, but people haven't been paying attention to it because they've been too busy buying shoes. And shoes are cute. I love shoes. But now that you can't go shopping, you have to look at your partner and be like, I've lived with you for 20 years, but do I even know you? You realize maybe you've only ever allowed yourself to scratch the surface of yourself, because if you went any deeper, you might have a mild meltdown for no reason, just out of the blue, and no amount of talking could explain why. I got a lot of shit for not only talking about it, but talking about lots of other things for a super long time. I don't feel justified in it because I'm not the kind of artist who's ever going to get justified. I will die an underdog, and that's cool with me. But I was right to ask, why are we here? Where did we come from? What are we doing? What happens if this insane, crazy sci-fi crisis happens and then you're stuck with yourself and you're stuck with your partner who doesn't pay attention to you? I'm not saying it's more relevant than ever, but my concern for myself, the country, the world, I knew we weren't prepared for something like this mentally. I also think it's a really good thing that we've gotten to this point where we have to bump up against ourselves. I'm not trying to say I'm a holy roller, because I'm not, but I think people are looking up to the sky a bit more and being like, why? What's the reason? Lana Del Rey. Do you think she's right? What she's saying is that the pandemic has just exposed what was already going on, or has it responsible for the mental health crises? I tend to think that one comes before the other. By the way, that circumstances can amplify or exacerbate situations, but they very seldom create them. And we've been talking on this podcast for years now about the deteriorating mental health and, in fact, the spiritual crisis of what it means to be alive, and the distraction and the nonstop kind of self-medication and self-salvation project. But what do you think this is true? What does it evoke for you?
It makes me think of an article that I think I referenced on here a few weeks ago, but about how suicide ideation is up for clergy, and how I guess it's been about a week and a half ago. A young clergy person in the Episcopal Church took her own life. And there was like immediate this kind of like thing on the internet where, and I did not know this person, a lot of people didn't know, but kind of took the story and was like, well, it's because of the pandemic. Like, and clergy stress is so high. And I kind of love what Lana Del Rey is saying here, because it's like, maybe there was mental illness there. Maybe there's mental illness there for all clergy who are like over functioning, surviving, trying to raise money, trying to preach the gospel, and also trying to like fall into whatever political, ideal that a whole range of brains has for them. I think there's a lot. I think that's a completely different way of looking at the situation that's very helpful for me, which is like, but what if we've all been carrying this stuff anyway, and now we just have the space for it to kind of come up for us? But it also makes me think of, and I think I said that again, like this was a thing that kind of came up for me this summer, but your brother, Simeon, he put something up on social media. We're buddies on social media. Simeon is the reason I write for Mockingbird, so shout out to Simeon Zoll. But he put something up about sort of work being an idol, like early in this. And I think about that probably every other day.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah, because we were forced to pull back from so much of our work, and I don't think we would have gotten to know each other or our kids at the level that we were kind of forced to get to know each other. And I'm incredibly grateful for that. Alongside that, though, I would say, you know, if there are hard things, if there are things you haven't dealt with, if you don't know your spouse at all, if you haven't spent any time with your children, this summer was a mess for you. You know, I mean, it was a mess for everybody, right? I'm not saying it wasn't a mess for us. I'm not saying there weren't things that we weren't like, oh my gosh, we've got to talk about this. We got to deal with this. But like, if there was like undealt with dysfunction, my goodness, you know what I mean? Like, it all rose to the top.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. It's true. I think that's why it's hard to get appointments with any therapist in the country right now.
Yeah. I mean, Simeon has like the nicest family ever, and they didn't have any of that. I'm pretty
yeah,
sure.
yeah.
So.
Simeon is just well, what can I say? Simeon just walks on water.
He does. Okay, RJ, what do you think? And poor Simeon's going to be like, why are they talking about me?
It's difficult for me to talk about because there's been so much upheaval in my personal life over the last 8 months, and I'm like, how much, how much of this do I chalk up to the virus, and how much do I chalk up to moving and starting a new job, and one of my kids starting college and living in a place where we have some friends, but nothing like the social support network that we had in Houston, because everyone's on lockdown. So it's difficult for me to talk about. I do think it's true. I mean, I tend to be pretty introspective anyway, and I'm a little bit of a mystery to myself. I'm always wondering, like, why is it that some days are good and some days are not? And I don't really, and I try to figure it out. I'm like, is it because I'm an extrovert? I love people. I love being around people, and sometimes when I start my day interacting with people, that day is better than just like sitting down and answering emails or making phone calls or writing a sermon. But sometimes that's not the case. And sometimes I get tons of sleep and I don't feel great. And sometimes I stay up till 2 a.m. Watching, the Hilary Swank Mars show on Netflix. And I feel great the next day, even though I got 5 hours sleep. So it's just like, I don't understand. And of course, I've done enough therapy and kind of mindfulness to know to not dwell on it too much and sort of let it go and try to live in the rhythms of life and be a little bit merciful with myself. And I gave a whole sermon like a month ago about our amazing inconsistency as people, right? How one moment we feel great, one moment not so much. And I think that connected with people, because I think that's been driven home in a way by this pandemic that it wasn't before, right? But I go back and forth on distraction, because you can't think about yourself and your relationships and all the time. You just can't do it, right? You're gonna go crazy, and we need other people. We do need community, but you don't need the same person all the time. Sometimes you need somebody different. So I do think that mental illness is a thing. It's always been a thing. It's always going to be a thing. I do think this isolation and loneliness and losing these idols and these hooks on which we hang our sense of self has been incredibly difficult and exacerbated a lot of that. But I also just have tremendous compassion for people and for myself, because then I talk to people here in Florida who do have highly developed social networks, and they also and are very positive people, and they're like, yeah, I could cry at any point.
Yeah.
I could sort of lose it. And I have friends here, but I haven't seen them in months either.
Yeah.
You know, like we're on lockdown, and I may have friends, but it doesn't really make a difference.
Well, she talks about elsewhere in the interview is that she's sort of encouraged by some of the reckoning that's happening, not only in her own industry with
All the divorces.
Me Too. Well, there's that.
I know.
But
Yeah.
she's more about the fact that you have to confront yourself a little bit, because I don't think you say, we haven't been in danger of dwelling too much on what we're actually like. I think from where I'm sitting, we've been over distracted. We have been over entertained. We haven't been sort of overly solipsistic or something. We may give the appearance of being narcissistic, but in fact, one of the ways that they're distracting themselves from themselves is through an endless amount of selfies, is through positioning themselves constantly. And that's why I found what she's talking about. She sees it as a reason for hope rather than a reason for despair. The other thing, when she says that the macrocosm is a reflection of the microcosm, this is one of the reasons why I as a preacher, I'm always trying to look for this more personal angle. It's not because I don't believe community is important, or that movements and policies aren't important, but we know that, and this is what those movies I was talking about bring to mind, is that what's really going on with people is the desire to love and be loved, and things like that. And if people are really unhappy or really lonely, that's going to become a conduit for anger. It's going to become a resentment thing. These groups of people are groups of individual people, and so we address them as though your individual suffers, which is what she's really saying, is that people have been suffering for a long time, and that this has maybe revealed a little bit more of that. So I find that so basically, when we're saying, well, if I just impose a law out there to change this circumstance, well, then it's going to filter down into people's hearts. And that's not really true. I love what Martin Luther King always says. He's like, the law cannot make me love you, but it can stop you from lynching me. I think that's there is a place for the law. It's extremely important, but he also recognizes that by changing the outside circumstances, it doesn't go outside in; it goes inside out, and that's a key insight, I think. And I think that's what Del Rey is saying here, and it's not what people want to hear, because if we can just keep the problem out there, then we can manage it, or we can keep it away from ourselves and detach from it in some way. And that's more easy to control than to say, well, actually, I think what did Stephanie Phillips say in that piece about social media? She says, I am the person I vilify, online. And that's a uncomfortable, but also a compassion-inducing place to be. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. It makes me, first, I just want to acknowledge, because I feel like other people are noticing this, that people's online discourse. I mean, I love what Lana Del Rey is saying, that we have to deal with ourselves, but I do think that instead of doing that, a lot of people are going online, and discourse online has been, I think, more vitriolic than I've ever seen it be. I mean, I saw a photograph of a friend from high school the other day, and it quickly descended into 4-letter words and stuff about defunding the police. And it was just her at a vacation photo. I mean, it was crazy. And pretty violent language, actually, about coming to people's houses. And I was like, what is happening? People are not well. And it's they're not dealing with themselves, they're going online. And this maybe links, but RJ, I'm going to go back and listen to your sermon, because I think that those are the kind of sermons we need right now. And I think the thing about preaching is when you preach to the individual, which is not a thing we do a lot in mainline Christianity, frankly. We tend to preach to the communal. And I understand the impulse, because Dave, as you were saying, we don't want to deal with ourselves. But the powerful thing is that when you preach the individual, you're actually preaching to heal the communal. But when you preach to the communal, no one ever has to examine their own hearts, right? Yeah. It always keeps us, it puts a barrier between us and having to deal with ourselves. So it's really important, I think. I mean, I know this is not a preaching podcast, but when we think about getting in the pulpit, I mean, that's why people like RJ have been such a huge influence on my preaching, because you always preach the individual. I mean, that's kind of where it starts. So and I think Lana Del Rey is kind of preaching to the individual here in this piece.
Yeah.
But I need to say something though too. David Browder, who's a friend of Mockingbird, he's a priest in Houston, Texas, great guy. And he worked in the quote unquote secular world for a while before he went to seminary and became a priest. But the sermon that started him on his path to the priesthood was one that your dad gave, Dave, in Birmingham on Ash Wednesday, or was it Good Friday? Maybe it was Good Friday. Yeah, and if you want to go heavy, Paul Zoll's sermon on Good Friday is about the heaviest of the heavy. But the sermon started with, and David Browder was working in politics at the time, across the street from the church, and he was like, "Yeah, what the heck? It's Good Friday. I'll go to church." And he was really not even really a Christian. But the sermon started with, "There's a razor thin line between reality and suicide."
Oh my word.
That's how the sermon started, and it hit David like a ton of bricks, and he's like, this guy is talking about reality. And the reason I bring that up is because, facing yourself is a thing. But if you're trying to face yourself without hope,
yes,
it's not going to go well.
It's not going to go well.
And it reminds me what Tim Kreider said when he inexplicably spoke at a Mockingbird conference a few years ago, who's an atheist, and he got up and said, I told all my friends I was going to speak at this Christian conference, and they were like, what are they thinking having you come speak? But he gave an amazing talk, and one of the things he said was, 150 years ago, Nietzsche declared the end of God, and we've been living like, and that he's sort of right. And for the last 100 years or so, we in the Western world have been experimenting what it looks like to live without God. And he would say, even I as an atheist would have to admit, it's not going well.
Oh my word.
And so, like I said, facing yourself is a thing, but if you're going to try to face yourself and your darkness and your inconsistency and the, without hope, without any sense of belovedness or forgiveness or grace or someone outside of yourself that can help you when you can't help yourself.
Right.
That's not hopeful.
Well,
I know what she's saying. I know, and she says it, right? Like she said, I'm not a holy roller, but we seem to be looking up. I hope people are looking up, because if you're only looking in, if you're only looking down, it's not going to go well.
And if they're finally looking up and they get to the church door and it's locked, what's going to happen?
Oh, God.
Missed opportunity.
www. Okay.
Worship with us online. What? I'm in pain right now. Sarah, I want to pick up on something you just said, though, about online discourse. There was a remarkable review of a new book called The Twittering Machine. That's a phrase from the painter Paul Klee that Richard Seymour has written. And the review is by Max Reed. And it was in Book Forum, which is usually very dense intellectual articles. This happened to be the same week that the documentary The Social Dilemma came out on Netflix.
Yeah.
And if you haven't watched it, I would say that it is sort of required viewing. It just interviews so many actual executives, people who were there in the room when a lot of these social media platforms were being launched. And it on the one hand, they all say that we thought we were doing something good. And it also just talks about how, if you're not, what's the line? If you're not paying for the product, that means you are the product. Very scary, and just trying to bring sort of an ethical edge to it. But it's not just a couple outliers. It's like the people that were the head of Pinterest, the head of, Instagram. It was anyway. It's worth watching. I think it feels a little like homework, frankly. And you might just want to, watch another episode of that Hillary Swank show. I understand.
I finished it already, so now on to. Then I watched Challenger. That's also done. So anyway,
I
continue.
thought about watching it last night. I want you to know that. But the Food Network had a Halloween bake-off, so.
I mean, if you're on Netflix, just go for the Chef's Table barbecue stuff.
This is the thing.
I mean, how can you pass that up? But here's what Max Reed says. He says, this is it. The Twittering machine is powered by an insight at once obvious and underexplored. We have, in the world of the social industry, become scripturient, meaning possessed by a violent desire to write incessantly. Our addiction to social media is at its core a compulsion to write. Through our comments, updates, DMs, and searches, we are volunteers in a, quote, great collective writing experiment. The rise of print, Seymour points out, played a crucial role in developing the idea of the modern nation, not to mention the bureaucratic state and industrial civilization. Now that epoch is ending, and a new revolution in literacy is extending the ability to write in public to billions of people worldwide. What will our new digital writing culture call into existence? Well, for many years, Silicon Valley's answer to that question has been freedom, prosperity, and digital utopia. An interconnected world in which progress and interchange wouldn't be obstructed or censored by the powerful. And, as Seymour acknowledges, our urge to write demonstrates, quote, how much was waiting to be expressed under the previous regime, during which access to large audiences was sharply limited by powerful gatekeepers, and the vast majority of ordinary people were relegated to the letters to the editor page if they were given a voice in print at all. In practice, however, what we have isn't a new political order, but a new kind of social life. The social industry wants us to keep writing, and writing, and writing, and writing, rendering legible, analyzable, and profitable nearly all our basic social interaction. And while massive Facebook server farms whirring away in Scandinavia might be able to make some vague sense of all that data, the rest of us can barely hear above the noise. Each new byte of information adds confusion and entropy and takes us further away from meaning and consequence. As Seymour points out, we've only just set aside prophecies of inevitable internet-born emancipation, and we should be careful not to make the same confident mistake in reverse, with moralizing, panicked screeds about inescapable algorithmic radicalization. What is scarier, anyway, than the idea that we've trapped on a collision course with TikTok totalitarianism is Seymour's insistence that we're not trapped at all. That in fact we are part of the machine and we find our satisfactions in it, however destructive they may be. Whatever dark future we hurtle toward, we are co-pilots on the journey. If we are compelled to write, it is because of, quote, something in us that is waiting to be addicted. A lack, a desire, a deficiency that we seek to address. Is it a longing for connection? A yearning for fame? If so, posting is a poor strategy. You are as likely to lose friends as you are to make them, and online celebrity is only ever 240 characters away from online infamy. So why do we keep participating in an activity that acts against our interests and gives us no particular pleasure? Is self-destruction in some perverse way the yield? And he traces this to Freud's idea that human beings have a death drive. Beyond the pleasure principle is the desire to die. Now, heavy stuff in relation to social
Nice light
media.
episode today.
Yeah, suicide.
Just suicide episode.
reality.
Just what the doctor
Don't
ordered
really
on the
talk
first day
about
of fall.
suicide.
Yeah, it's
It's
great.
just in everything.
But it's the great question, isn't it, about social media? If we all know that it does nothing but drive us crazy, although we get occasional dopamine hits from the likes and stuff like that. What I found interesting was what he was saying about it being a revolution in writing. There's
love
so
that.
many words, and this idea that there was so much waiting to be expressed, and that's
Yes.
the good part of this, is that people are
Yes.
able to express what has been tamped down.
Yeah.
And I love the fact that a lot of the gatekeepers have been dismantled, and yet, when all that writing just becomes data that people can sell stuff to you with, it gets pretty dark pretty quickly. What do you guys thought about this?
I think about this all the time, mostly because I, as a mother, live in terror that my children will look up and be like, I'm going to sue you and we're never going to speak again because you have taken my image and put it on the internet. I mean, that is like a constant fear of mine, to the point that like I post their image a whole lot less. So there's that. And then, but even still, like I still participate in it. And let's be clear, love it. And so like I still wonder if history will judge me for that. I do absolutely love this idea, though, that this has given people a place to write. Because one thing I've learned in being a writer is like I probably have a conversation with someone once a week about like, how did you start writing and how do I start writing and all this stuff. And I think this is this incredible way for people to have access, to immediately be able to sort of publish something, which is both great and terrifying, right? Because sometimes people publish stuff they shouldn't publish. But I don't know. I also am. I would push against the idea that there's like nothing of value beyond just our own dopamine hits, because I do think there's really beautiful connection that happens in these platforms.
Right.
And I had this like horrible theater teacher in high school who just was like crazy, and she's dead now, so like recently, so like it's like I'm not supposed to say anything bad about her, but she was nuts. And a girlfriend from high school who was like the loveliest person, but like always wanted a big part, always auditioned. This teacher was so awful to her, never gave her anything good, and was always like, you can be on crew. Just sucked. And she put, this friend is like now working in inner city school, and she's like, I'm gonna start, like, she like put me there, she's like, I'm gonna start a thespian troupe, like, because that's what we were, which yes, people always made the lesbian joke, but anyway, it was Mississippi. So she's starting her own thespian troupe at this like black high school she's working at, and we immediately, like, everyone put up these like memories and encouragements for her of like what that had been like for us. And like, that is, I would never have gotten that. You know what I mean? Like, that's such a beautiful gift. Like, I was like, don't only give them monologues from the Glass Menagerie. There are other plays, like, it was just amazing.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I really pushed back against this idea that it's, yes, they are taking our information. Yes, they are selling it. But like, there's also some really beautiful connection that happens.
That's true, Sarah. That's the best part of social media, is when you, post something that's kind of, personal, and you reconnect with people that you haven't seen forever. Like I posted a little video about our drive-in worship service we're doing, and some guy that I sang in choir with in high school, Michael Petrona, who's a great guy that I haven't talked to in forever, was like, I know that guy. I recognize that hair, and it was very sweet. I'm not on Twitter. I only really, I guess I technically am, and I check in on it like twice a year or something. But I do, people repost things from Twitter to Facebook, which I am on. And usually they're either really angry or feeling really self-justified, And it's like, this might not be terribly helpful. I know what you mean, Sarah. There are very good things about it, the way that it allows you to quickly and easily stay connected to people all across the world that it would otherwise be difficult to stay connected to. And I know Ben Madison has done amazing things on TikTok, and he has this incredible Bible study going. He's another priest we're connected to in New Jersey.
Yeah.
So there are really good things that happen. But yeah, there's also a lot of really bad stuff that happens. And the thing that came to my mind, I'm going to talk about my wife for just a sec, who has started and runs this kind of amazing business, but a business that really has almost no social media presence whatsoever. And in fact, like, she had an Instagram account, it got stolen, she never got it back. Her Facebook account also just this week, like on our day off, like I was actually playing tennis a Saturday, and I'm on my way back, and she's like, someone took over my Facebook account, but I'm like, luckily you only have 200 likes. So like, it doesn't make a difference. But she hired this young woman, recent college grad, to sort of help out in the office here in Florida. And this woman is very social media savvy. And she's kind of like, how did you build this business when you have no social media presence whatsoever? Like, how is that even possible? And it's a reminder, like, it is possible. And it's this really powerful thing that maybe in some ways at the end of the day also just doesn't matter. Like, it's such a weird thing. It's like, does it matter? Does it not matter? Is it everything? Is it nothing? Is it destructive? I don't know. I mean, clearly people are thinking and reading a lot about it. But as someone who's just older and not on social media that much, I don't know, man.
Yeah, it's really hard because I've been really wanting to get off Facebook, just at least until after.
Well, you did one time. You did once before.
For a long time.
For 12 years, And
Yeah.
12
and I
years.
didn't, and you know what? We were able to build Mockingbird without it. And,
Yeah.
I've enjoyed some of the reconnections that I've had on that, but also like it does all the things that I would say social media does to a person. And you have to reckon with how you're presenting yourself constantly and comparisons to other people. But but I've been wondering, like, can I afford to get off this in terms of someone who is interested in helping Mockingbird do well and helping people listen to this podcast and all and people interact with things in that way. And so the truth is probably it would be fine if I got off. But what I love about this piece is that once again. People's motivations for doing things are often opaque to the person themselves. And if we continue to act in such a way that is demonstrably destructive or hurtful to us over time, and they interview in The Social Dilemma, they interview all these executives. They're like, we were so excited about all these things that were happening. They had such a high anthropology, and this is Silicon Valley,
yeah.
that they didn't really realize that people, that there would be a dark side, and that in fact all of these tools for connection were going to produce basically the opposite. And there was, I think, Jamel Bowie this week in the New York Times penned an op-ed saying Facebook has been an unmitigated disaster for the world, and what he was talking about was the fact that tons of governments like Bolivia and Vietnam have tried to influence Facebook to basically skew elections, but also to really root out certain things, and it's become a totalitarian tool. And you could say it's been a totalitarian tool on all sides of the equation, but it's very scary. So I just think that when he says that maybe there's something in us that's waiting to be addicted, I mean, I think he's talking about our yearning for God. I think that's the transcendence. So I see that you can't help but look at social media and see this howling digital wind and think that it's this writhing human need for something good and some sort of connection that goes beyond likes and dislikes, but that actually has a connection to the divine. So that's what I liked. And I do think that people's motivations when it comes to these things are largely, they're not always completely transparent to us. And you can look back at something and be like, gosh, I thought I was into this for that reason, but in fact, I was lying to myself. I was really just enjoying the vitriol. I was loving it. That was the real drug. And part of me needed to feel something because I felt dead otherwise. And that sort of stuff. Now, on that, gosh, thanks, Dave. What a great episode. We're going to go to something lighter now. But we're going to something lighter that I think.
Well, wait. Can I say? Let me say something though. Okay, so this actually goes back to the Lana Del Rey article. Like, I liked what she said about relationships and mental illness. Towards the end, she and her producer, who's her interviewer, start sort of congratulating themselves for knowing everything on Earth. And I was like, and that's the danger of social media to some degree. It does give you this illusion that what's going on out there, or what people are really like. I mean, I'm sure you've all had this experience where someone personally, on a personal level, and you love them, they're the best, and then you see the stuff they post on social media, and you're like, oh, like OMG.
Yeah, now I have to hate you.
Well, no, but you don't. I mean, I just ignore it. I mean, to the degree which you think that interacting with people on social media is the same as actually interacting with who they are, or what they would be like if you met them face to face, or the kind of relationship you could actually have. That's not helpful. Or the illusion it gives you that you understand everything, which, again, Lana Del Rey a little bit went into that. It's like, come on, give me a break. And that goes back to the personal is universal, right? That if you want to speak universally, the best you can do is actually get to know people and actually get to know yourself in a face-to-face, let's sit down and talk, or can I also say, I'm so sick of email. Like, I actually want to talk on the phone to people
Spoken like
now.
a rector.
Yeah, exactly. So sick of it. Let's pick up the phone. I mean, I've been sick of email for a long time. But
and email has been sick of you.
Yeah, it has. It has. I'm sure, and I'm sure people are sick of getting emails to me. So there are these tools we have, but that can be useful in certain sorts of ways. But if you're longing to understand the world, to connect to people, I think this goes back to what Anne Lamott said in her amazing book on writing Bird by Bird, that if you want to write something really universal, you get as specific and particular as you possibly can. And that's the way you're going to connect, right? You don't go wide, you go narrow, 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 narrow. And I think that's kind of true relationally as well as you know, literarily, literary wise. Anyway,
No, I think you're
so
100% right. And I will say, Sarah, at least I know that you're active on Instagram, and you probably get very personalized ads. I don't know, or maybe you do.
I do.
I do.
Oh, yes.
I'm constantly getting and
I get those too. It's bizarre. It's crazy.
and talk about the universal becoming particular in a way that's like, wait a second, didn't I just look for that on Amazon? What's happening here?
Yeah.
But one of the things that if you've been on social media in the last little while, you're probably getting a lot of marketing for brands that look very similar. And there's a word for this. They're called blands. Now, let me explain it to you, because this is a new word for me, but not a new phenomenon at all. This is from Ben Schott in Bloomberg, which comes to us from Addie Jenkins. Welcome to your bland new world. And he starts by talking about Colgate has a new smart toothbrush called Hum. And it very closely resembles another one called Quip. And Quip is equally flattered by Goby, Burst, Bokeh, Bruche, Gleam, and Shine. Shine spelled S-H-Y-N.
Nope.
But you might have, you know what I'm talking about here.
For all those other people who brush their teeth.
That's going to be what all the millennials name their third kid.
Shine. This is indicative of a new
Aren't you a millennial?
I am.
a new consumer
I might
world.
have a third, and if I do, he or she
Shine.
will be Shine with a Y.
Yeah.
This is indicative of a new, wider consumer war between brands and blands. What makes a brand a bland is duality, claiming simultaneously to be unique in product, groundbreaking in purpose, and singular in delivery, while slavishly obeying an identikit formula of business model, look and feel, and tone of voice. And the naming tropes are all the same. They emerge again and again. Oftentimes it's named after a character, either something calculatedly generic like Judy, Floyd, Henry, Billy, Maud. Those are all blands.
Yeah.
Or Harry's.
I'm familiar with some
The
of these,
shaving.
yes.
Or studiously cool, Warby Parker derives from two Jack Kerouac characters. Warby Parker is one of the originals here.
I'm like, don't be hating on Warby Parker.
Casper, the mattress company. These are evergreen. These are all blands. Certain bland catchphrases are endlessly recycled in the marketing. This is incredible. Quote, attention to detail, timeless craftsmanship, thoughtfully sourced, simple and seasonal, chef crafted. If you're on one of those meal delivery things that apparently they really want me to sign up for.
You'll do it for like 2 weeks, and then you'll be like, this is no longer worth it.
Everyday essentials, a membership designed around you. Join our community. Fits in with your busy life. We make it easy. We're passionate about. We're obsessed with. We never settle. Tireless dedication to quality. Visually, blands are simple, neutral, and flat. The palette is plain and pastel with the occasional vibrant splash. The mood is upbeat and happy, or pensive and cool, but never truly real. The dress code is smart casual. Blands are always positioned as underdogs. Although they're funded by angel investments, venture capital, and private equity, blands present themselves as scrappily uncorporate. Quote, we didn't create Oscar because we liked health insurance, quite the opposite. Or, Monica and Andy wasn't born in a boardroom, it was born in a delivery room. All blands are individuals, like Brian of Nazareth, I guess, is another bland. But blands always have a narrative. Rarely do blands declare, we were founded to exploit a niche and leverage venture capital until the target of our disruption buys us out. Instead, they proffer origin stories that mash up the indie movie meet cutes with aspirational grail quests. Like the one for Candid. Once upon a time, 5 of us started talking about our teeth. ... Blands are humble. Blands pledge to do one thing well, and in doing so, they present as a calm oasis amidst a chaos of commerce. Many blands work hard to position themselves as affordable luxuries or premium mediocrity. That's another word for it. Many blands attempt to coax users into memberships and subscriptions, using the language of community and convenience to create long-term commitments to traditionally fleeting purchases. But you'll note that blands are ineluctable. Despite embodying the vanguard of consumer capitalism, blands tend to be subtly Soviet, quasi-post-apocalyptic. Even within a saturated market, every brand's message is somehow a post-choice totalitarian inevitability. There is only one mattress. There is only
There
one
can be
razor.
only one.
There is only one chef-inspired human-grade subscription service dog food. While there is nothing disreputable in blitz scaling for an exit, it does rather undermine the David versus Goliath bland narrative. Meaning they always end up selling out to Colgate in the end, or the larger Serta mattresses. But do you guys know? Does this ring a bell?
I feel so mad at you right now because you've like ruined everything that makes me happy.
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
I mean, I own some of these products. Just last night, I sent my husband, while we were on the couch together staring at our phones while a program was on the television, I sent him a link to a watch that I want. That is like all the other watches I get ads for on Instagram, but it's from Australia. Shout out to Stephanie Phillips. And I wanted it. It's literally called, the watch is called the Classic. Okay.
Yep.
And it's funny to me because even I don't know. I mean, I'm also thinking about kind of the way that home decor kind of looks when these things are and I buy these things. They didn't even get into the makeup. There's so many lines of like lip gloss that will change your life. A face mask that like you won't have to wear makeup anymore because I'm fairly certain it dyes your skin orange. But anyway, there's all these like different levels, but they advertise in this like it's like everything is white and there's a green plant. Like that's also like. So there's this like fascinating. I have to say that Southern Living has this hilarious like I wish I could remember. I can't remember the guy's name, but gardening section, and he's called the Grumpy Gardener. And recently he gave advice to a woman who wrote in because she was opening up a plant nursery, and she's like, "What kind of plants should I have?" And he's like, "Get a bunch of them green plants that young people put in white rooms with no furniture." So I do think it's all part of this like look of, and this is the word actually that comes to my mind, purity.
Yeah. It's there's only one mattress.
There's and like that this will be like the answer. And I can say as someone, because I don't want any person to listen to this and to feel guilty about buying these things, but I can say as someone who has purchased many of these things that have a single name that you could name, your child, or tampons that come in the mail on a subscription. It's not like it. You never get there. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's all this, like you order it and then it comes in and you're like, well, I mean, this is just a toothbrush. Like it's a weird, like
the unboxing is really exciting. Like the packaging is amazing.
Sure. Well, I'm on like 3 clothing subscriptions. Like I get boxes in all the time.
If you're a man in your 40s, what they're advertising to you about how like
you don't have time to shop. You don't know what to wear.
They're like,
you're a fashion moron.
Your hair is thinning, but here's a new way to do it. Or obviously it's like I think Roman is the one that's about kind of erectile dysfunction, and it's like, like it looks cool. It's got pastels and it's named after something Roman, and you feel like virile, and you're like, wait a second, why do I keep getting these?
There's a woman who started a company. I mean, allegedly, this is their story. This is the worst one for me. She started a company that's the equivalent, I think, for women. Mm-hmm. So it's like dealing with like, I guess you can get birth control or whatever through her, but you can also get like treatments for UTIs. And it's literally like you'll be like scanning through Instagram, it'll be like pleasant pictures of your friends' kids. Like, oh, there's a cute puppy. And then it'll be like, after having 11 UTIs in a year. And I'm like, oh my God. That's not a good story.
Yeah, but
the
packaging is very simple and cool.
Oh yeah. And it's like really like, it's just like so, everything is so chic. But you do wonder, like, I mean, we look back at the 80s and we're like, what were we thinking? Like visually, and it will be really fascinating. I mean, I think there's a sense of, when I look at the design, I think there is a sense of simplicity and purity. I also think there's a sense of like, some sort of like, Soviet era, like, do you know what I mean? Like, you can only get this one
Uniformity,
box of
Brave
hair
New
color.
World.
Yeah,
It's
just
acknowledging the paradox of choice, that people, if they have too many choices, they won't choose
yeah.
anything. And
Yes.
it's marketing to people's, again, to their existential angst and their confusion, and life is so tough. I really just want the razors to come every month and not worry about it. And maybe, you know what? Hey, while I'm there, I'll also get some shampoo and some soap, because I don't want to deal with any of this stuff, because life is tough. And I mean,
Do you guys have stuff for UTIs? Great. Can I put that in the cart?
oh yeah. I mean, I also want a weighted blanket. I hear there's only one.
Oh, I'm obsessed with weighted blankets.
Well-
That's the other thing. It's just just the language that they use. Like, I was like, I could have written for this. Like, when they're like, we're obsessed with, I'm like, oh my God, this is like, I just feel so seen, and like everything in my life is
And it's
written down.
always very, very value. I mean, I didn't mention the stuff that they're always very heavily laden with values, more than like any Christian brands would be.
yeah.
I mean, they before it's like, you can sign up for the subscription, but have you registered to vote yet? I mean, it's like,
Yes.
what?
Yeah.
I just really thought, my dog would like that food. But it makes me think of seculosity. Of course, there's that. I
Yeah.
remember putting up a picture one time that from a Qualtrics conference, which was sort of a tech conference, that said, "Turn customers into fanatics, products into obsessions, employees into ambassadors, and brands into religions." And in wrapping purpose, narrative, personality, purity all into one, there is, at least unconsciously, a religious impulse being exploited here. And again, I'm all for signing up for these things. Life is so hard. It is great to simplify it with a subscription service that you actually like. And yet, if you dig a little deeper, I feel like I'm being manipulated, and I am, and maybe we're gonna be happy to be manipulated.
But this sounds weird. A lot of these subscription services, or anything that allows you to just stay home and never have to go anywhere, they so minimize the kind of spontaneous interactions you might have with people that I feel like life is made up of. Like, my wife loves to grocery shop online, which is very convenient. I get that. It just simplifies things. I miss going to the grocery store. I miss taking Marshall to the grocery store because he just says hi to everybody and he's hilarious.
Costco.
But or HEB, actually. I miss my HEB, I gotta say. But yeah, the idea of having to go somewhere and interact with someone to find something you need, as opposed to it just coming in a box in the mail, it just seems like another way that we're sort of, voluntarily isolating ourselves, or maybe just creating more space to work or death scroll through our feeds. Yeah, there's
It definitely
Right.
corresponds with the thing we talked about, the spiritual consultants saying that, like, if brands have really gotten, the political activism and branding has really become one thing, like with the Gillette commercials and stuff, like the next phase is this for spirituality to be melded with corporate culture, and maybe that's what's happening with Blands, but the design is just too hard to resist. So anyway, any final thoughts on Blands before we get into something a little bit?
I mean, if any of our listeners are curious about a product, just drop me an email, because I probably bought it.
You'll let us know if it's
Sarah will
if
send you a
it's-
free
if it's-
sample.
If the marketing
Yeah,
is
exactly.
Sarah has a stockpile of every imaginable
Of
product.
Blands. Yeah.
Yeah, happy to send them along.
Well, finally, we're going to talk about last week. Ruth Bader Ginsburg died, and the internet exploded. It turns out, I mean, my cynicism is just off the charts, but it's like, all of a sudden we were all epidemiologists for a little while, then we were civil rights historians, and then all of a sudden everyone's judicial like fanboys, which growing up I didn't even know who the justices were. Now I get the fact. I don't want to make fun, because this is a very serious person.
Be careful, Dave. They will come for
They
you.
will come for me. I just never thought I'd see the day.
And by they, Sarah means herself.
It's
Sarah means her, but like, they're my people, and I can't help it. And like, I won't be able to stop them, Dave. That's what I'm telling you right now. I won't be able to stop them.
I get it. We all have heroes, but it just,
Sure.
if you told me when I was 18 that this would be the kind of cult of personality around a judge, I just,
Can I say something about this, and then we can cut?
yeah.
I just, for me, and I totally fall. I mean, I do fall on the more liberal end of the spectrum. If you've listened to this podcast at all, you probably picked up on that. But, and I was deeply sad that she died. But when RJ talked earlier about self-examination and being hopeless and how like it's just a lethal combination. I just the fact that and maybe people are right. Maybe people are right. I understand all the repercussions for I'm an intelligent person. I understand how politics works. I understand how the Supreme Court works. But the fact that it felt like for so many of us that the future of our country, the well-being of our children, all of this rested on the tiny, ancient, bird-like shoulders of this almost 90-year-old woman. And that people, when she died, seemed hopeless, was deeply sad to me. Like at every level, it was deeply sad to me. I know this is not the feminist thing to say, and I get it, but the fact that she was still working at that age made me sad, I'll be honest. I mean, and maybe it didn't make her sad, and maybe it didn't make anybody else sad. Maybe it just made me sad, and that's fine. I can do sad all by myself. But like, I don't know. It really struck me how hopeless people are. Like when she died, that was like the word all week for me, was like, wow, people are really hopeless. Like this was people's last hope, was this almost 90-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And I get it, but I'm also just like, wow, I hope, as Lana Del Rey said, I hope people can look up.
Yeah. Well, we're gonna read something that I found really remarkable in a lot of the tributes to RBG, and this is a duo. Dickinson highlighted this for Mockingbird in a piece called "Love Across the Political Divide." And we wrote was Antonin Scalia and Ruth Bader Ginsburg were fully politicized. One was a rock of conservative thought, Scalia; the other an icon of liberal theory. Both went through the full vetting and voting of the U.S. government to be on the highest court we created. Both got over 90 votes out of 100 in the Senate. Both never let a contested decision go uncommented upon with extreme rigor and passion. This was serious business. The future of our culture was being wrecked or saved by their votes, and they almost always disagreed. They also loved each other. Both were idolized, quoted, and championed by those who believed as they did. Both were lionized in the constituent presses who followed them. Being heroic to those who believe in what you espouse is intellectual support. It buttresses what you believe. And yet love accepts the discord, maybe even enjoys it, if it ignores the ideological constructions we make. Michelle Obama and George Bush simply enjoy each other. It angers and outrages some, but they do not matter. How could they possibly love each other? Scalia, a robust Catholic. Ginsburg was a non-observant Jew. One a hunter, the other a thinker. One a white male in a time when white men ruled, the other a woman in a time of oppression and prejudice. But they loved each other. Those who knew them say they loved opera, food, and of course the law, but that is not why they and their spouses loved being together. They went on vacation a lot together. This weekend of Ginsburg's passing, Antonin Scalia's son Christopher revealed the secret sauce of their love for each other. They laughed. And what this prompted me to look up was Ruth Bader Ginsburg's eulogy for Antonin Scalia when he died. And she said in that, I'll read a couple paragraphs. She says, another indelible memory, the day the court decided Bush versus Gore, December 12th, 2000, I was in chambers, exhausted after the marathon. Review granted Saturday, briefs filed Sunday, oral argument Monday, and opinions completed and released Tuesday. No surprise, Justice Scalia and I were on opposite sides. The court did the right thing, he had no doubt. I disagreed and explained why in a dissenting opinion. Around 9 p.m., the telephone, my direct line, rang. It was Justice Scalia. He didn't say, get over it. Instead, he asked, Ruth, why are you still at the court? Go home and take a hot bath. Good advice I promptly followed. Once asked how we could be friends, given our disagreement on a lot of things, Justice Scalia answered, I attack ideas, I don't attack people. Some very good people have some very bad ideas, and if you can't separate the two, you got to get another day job. Ginsburg says, I will miss the challenges and the laughter he provoked, his pungent, eminently quotable opinions, so clearly stated that his words never slipped from the reader's grasp. But I will also miss the roses he bought me on my birthday.
Mm.
To me, that was just such a charitable and beautiful portrait in the midst of, as we talked about, so much negativity and vitriol. To see this woman who was really, as you say, she was the target of so many hopes on the political left. To know that as a person, she was charitable and deeply good friends with someone who was on the opposite side. I mean, that's grace, that's we need more of that. I just was really touched by it. So in the midst of people who were using this opportunity to lecture or to pump up their cause, here you had the example that she set and that Scalia set maybe went beyond just ideology. And I don't know. There's something deeply gracious about this that I felt was worth highlighting. Do two of you see it that way or a different way?
It's funny. I was talking to my students about, and I can't remember who it was that said this. I feel like it might have been Tully and Chivijan several years ago, but that, if you ask the person on the street what Christianity was about, a random person, they would say probably like judgment, being judgmental, and that their right answer is forgiveness. And I totally agree with that, but I actually wonder, we've been talking a lot just as as college students trying to navigate this heated political moment, that maybe if the right answer isn't like a sense of not being judgmental, like if that is more of the goal, because it's really choosing against relationship over and over again when we live in this space of constantly separating ourselves from other people. I mean, we are in a neighborhood where the signs have started to come up for people voting for the presidential election and for local elections. And I'll be honest, I've had a few moments where I'm like, okay, when I drive by somebody's house. So that's what you're doing. And I've really had to make the decision to kind of step around that knowledge and towards that person. And I think that's the example that we get, from these two individuals. And I also think that is why in the wake of her death, this has been such a key story that people want to talk about over and over again. People desperately need this narrative right now that it is in fact possible, and not just possible, that like joy can come from being in a relationship with people we disagree with. So I don't know. I really think that we don't know what God is doing in other people's hearts. And I think that part of the problem right now is that we've made the assumption that not only that God isn't doing anything in anyone's heart, but that we know what people's hearts consist of.
Yeah.
And I think it's really dangerous.
Yeah, I was thinking about the sermon this past week. The text, as I mentioned earlier, was the Exodus passage of the Israelites grumbling in the wilderness and complaining and saying, why did you bring us out here to die? And, so often 2020 has felt like a wilderness, just where everything's, all the sources of life have dried up, the desert. And with the Israelites, he was like, how did they get there? Was it all their doing, or was it, in fact, did they know exactly how they got there? And that's that God led them there. And that was, in fact, he was about to show them he wasn't going to abandon them. But the desert experience was not independent of God. In fact, it was the method and means. I found that to be tremendously hopeful in a time of what does, you're right, feels like everywhere I look, I can't see, hey, my last like potential source of life or hope just passed away. Like what are you doing? That story just speaks through the millennia, I think, to you and I who are right here. The bread from heaven,
It made me think of marriage, actually.
I
Because
love
when I'm doing premarital counseling, in my experience, a successful marriage boils down to just like a few basic elements. One is like, do you enjoy spending time together? Are you hot for each other? And can you laugh together? Do you get each other's sense of humor? I think that's so huge, that for some inexplicable, miraculous reason, my wife thinks I'm funny, and that what a huge
You
gift
found
that
the
is.
one.
I did.
I'm glad someone thinks that.
Oh, thanks, someone. Oh, there is a God. There is a God. But how marital love is a miracle, and in some ways, friendship is a miracle, right?
Yeah.
Finding someone who's willing to go on vacation with you, to send you flowers, to spend time with you, who thinks you're funny. That is a miracle. And when you find it, you don't worry too much about some of the things on which you might disagree, right? If any couple or any friendship was submitted to the kind of scrutiny that Ginsburg and Scalia were, it could never survive, because no two people agree on everything and have contradictory viewpoints. But if you just, yeah, I love the refrain of this article, but they loved each other, but they loved each other. That is, it's a miracle. And you don't question it, hopefully not too much when it happens. You just enjoy it. It's an encouragement. Sarah, you're going to say something.
I have to say, I have a friend, a very good friend here in Houston, and her husband is definitely voting for Donald Trump, and she's definitely voting for Joe Biden, and she's fascinating to talk to, and I just am so struck by the witness of that,
Yeah.
and the power of that when we feel like we have to disown our neighbors, right? Or write people off entirely because they've put something up on the internet and now we have to hate them. And people can hold together a real marriage in the midst of the political moment that's happening in our country right now. It's just it's incredible. It's such a witness to me.
Yeah, because it really is if the default position is if you're voting for that person, then there's two options. You're either evil or crazy, and
Right.
you can't think about that. You cannot punt to that with the person you're married to, unless
Right.
you just want to.
Right.
So that would be very interesting to sort of. I would love to. Maybe there'll be a podcast series done by some nice people that just get inside these relationships where two people are like that,
Yeah.
because that's what we need more of. I hear
Yeah.
it so often. It's like, how could you possibly? That person must be
Right.
insane. And you think well, if you don't have the
Right.
imagination to just go to just entertain for a second that they're not either of those. They're not crazy or evil. And to somehow get in between that, then we really don't have hope for. The country. I mean, imagination is one of the things that I think is missing, and I think it's one of the things that social media, frankly, it works against, because it keeps us so addicted, as we say. Although the memes are great, and we've talked about it before.
Love the memes. If I only knew what a meme was.
You guys are so old.
It reminds me too what happened a couple weeks ago, which I don't think we ever mentioned, how Kellyanne Conway and George Conway both at the same time decided to step away from
Yeah.
public life. She who's been led Trump's election campaign, he who's head of the Lincoln Project,
Right.
and it was all in response to a tweet that their teenage daughter
Yep.
put out, and they're like, "That's it, it's over,
We're out.
we're done, we're pulling out, we're focusing on what matters," and I found that was hopeful to me, actually.
Again, we're back to the first article, and one of the
Yes.
ways that we can have hope, and people would say, "Oh, this is easy for you to say," but I really don't. I see it as transcending
Is
all
hope easy for
sorts
anybody
of.
right now? Sorry.
No, but it transcends all sorts of barriers. Remember when we talked about? I think it's in Eat, Pray, Love. I think, or one of those books. They interview all those Cambodian refugees who are doing it, and they interview them as "What are you thinking about?" And they're all thinking about the relationships that they had with people on the boat, and they're like, she slept with my cousin, and now I'm so mad, and I think that one of the reasons for hope is to know that people are actually more similar than they're not. And and by that I mean that they're all dealing with what gets exposed during these times. What clearly got exposed to the Conways is that there are things that are more important. And okay, maybe that's privilege talking, but I don't think so. I think it's the stuff you think about on your deathbed, the names, the relationships. It has to do with and those things are the things that you're going to be on your mind when you get to God. It's not going to be the election of 2020. It just won't be.
No.
I can predict that with almost 100% confidence. It doesn't mean the things aren't important. Of course, that's what people hear when you say that. It's like, are you saying it doesn't matter who we vote for? Of course it matters, and it's within Spotify's right to ask me to register to vote every time I log on. But it's not the what I wanted from
And to subscribe to the Joel Rogan podcast.
what I want is from Spotify is to listen to songs about love. And about nostalgia and the past and these things that connect me to how God has worked in my life. That's where I'm after. I'm not actually thinking about the policy changes and partisan issues. So,
And Dave, it's funny you said that. I've been thinking a lot about that and sort of the masthead of the Mockingbird Quarterly. To care and not to care.
Mm-hmm.
That's so powerful because I find there's so much in my life that feels so important and so heavy. And it's like the more important it feels and the heavier it feels, it's like the less I want to think about it. But if I'm just like, okay, this is important, but it's not that big of a deal, then suddenly some space opens up to move forward, and to act in love and joy and freedom, and not the sense of everything being so heavy all the time. And Sarah, gosh, you were talking about misplaced faith and hope. It reminds me, there was some podcast I was listening to where someone was talking about either they're a parent or someone they knew who was like on their deathbed and they were dying, but they were just waiting for the release of the Mueller report so they could die in peace. And now it's like, you think about that and it's like, who even, like, what, like, remember the Mueller report?
Yeah,
remember that?
remember
And now
that.
it's just like, what even, like, who cares?
Right.
Like, that was like, it's so... And I did see something on social media which was helpful, something about how all these things we concern ourselves, and I think it was something particularly about sort of patriotism, right? And patriotism matters, but how it's all too small for Jesus. It's all just too small.
Yeah.
He's so much bigger than any of that. He's so much bigger, and yet also so much smaller, so much more individual, so much more specific, right? That whenever his disciples try to get him to Jesus to talk about somebody else, oh, look what they're doing, look what's going on over there, how about those people? Jesus always like, no, what about you?
Mm-hmm.
What about you? It's sort of, again, that mixture of the specific and particular that really is what matters. That's the universal.
well, why don't we end it there, RJ? Who do you say that I am, RJ?
You're the Philip Seymour Hoffman character in Almost Famous. at the beginning.
Okay. On that note, Sarah, you have to answer the question now. Would you rather have a hole in your head where people could see all your thoughts, or would you rather be dead? Like, what's your answer?
I already have a hole in my head where people can see all my thoughts. So
That's
I'm
right.
fine.
It's a false
Annie
choice.
Condon just doesn't realize that yet. So.
She will.
Yeah. She's in for a rude awakening.
The more questions
Yeah.
like that she asks, I love it. I can't wait.
I know.
All right. Love you
All
too.
right.
Talk to you soon.
Love you guys.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. Remember, you can find us on the web at www.mbird.com. And we'd always love to hear from you at info@mbird.com. Audio production for the Mockingcast is provided by TJ Hester. And if you like what you've heard, please do drop over to iTunes and leave us a rating and review. Until next time.